at the Bolin Legacy Weekend 2020. My name is Alex Dederick, class of 2015, and I am the chair of the Williams Men of Color Executive Committee. The Williams Men of Color, as you know, is an ad hoc group that supports existing alumni affinity network groups. With the help of Geddes Morales, Raph Johnson, and Ian Williams, we've been putting together a very special presentation this weekend for a little over a year. We are so excited to connect with you today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Raph Johnson, the moderator of our next panel. You'll notice in the chat function, we've also included a link to each of the panelists' bios online. Raph?
Good afternoon. The theme of our panel today is the 3 C's: change, community, and commitment. Our community has a wealth of knowledge on navigating change and uncertainty. The alumni joining us today on the panel are excited to share their perspectives and experiences on adapting to that change, finding purposeful work careers, commitment to education, and the importance of building community together. We're going to start out with a little bit of an introduction from everybody. I'll start first. My name is Raph Johnson, class of '88, also parent of 2 members of the class of '21. I am probably the old man on the panel, first found out about Williams back in '83, and the thing that actually brought me to the school was the sense of community and commitment that I experienced. Everybody here has had similar experiences and are looking forward to sharing that. With that, I'm going to ask Stevon Cook to actually introduce himself.
Yes, peace and good morning, or it's morning in California, it's afternoon on the East Coast. I'm hailing to you from San Francisco, where I was born and raised, and I'm Williams graduating class of 2008. I currently serve on the San Francisco Board of Education, running for what's equivalent to the city council in San Francisco, called the Board of Supervisors. And, you know, excited to be here. I wasn't the type of student at Williams that you would imagine sharing insights years later. But I learned a lot and got a lot, and so I'm happy to be in community with all of you. Shout out to David Edwards, Joshua Adeyemi, Fumi. I see y'all in the chat. Glad to be here.
Perfect. Next, Marquis Daisy, please.
Hello, everyone. Marquis Daisy, member of the class of 2005, Williams College. I'm currently a producer for ESPN Films within a 30 for 30 documentary series group, and super excited to be here. Haven't seen some of these faces in a while, so pretty cool.
Next, we have Billy Green.
Hey everyone, how are you? I am Billy Green, originally class of '02, got kicked out of Williams, came back, and then I graduated '03. So that could tell you right there, just in my little year discrepancy, that there's a lot in my story. I'm back home, just like Stevon, broadcasting from El Barrio, you know, that we have that flavor. That's the flavor I brought to Williams, and that was part of my experience, and I'll probably talk a little more about it later. I'm currently a New York City Department of Education teacher. I teach chemistry for high school students, but I just don't teach chemistry. I take my job really seriously in terms of being a social justice movement and using science to empower Black and brown bodies. Hence the reason why now I'm a doctoral student at Columbia University, working on my work on intersectionality and STEM. And that's a little bit of my intro. So thank you.
And last but not least, we have Bobby Walker.
How you doing? I'm Bobby Walker Jr. I'm actually sitting here in my home in Greenwich, Connecticut, but I'm a native of Dallas, Texas. Can't tell you what a shock it was coming from Dallas to Williamstown. Can't even imagine. A southern boy way up north, was way too cold. Those were 4 years of extreme growth. You know, got a lot from Williams. Did a lot while I was there. Did sports, several committees. Worked. I think my wife, when she first met me, thought I was a cafeteria employee. I worked so much, but that's just the way it was. Now I spent 19 years as an educator, independent school educator, and the past 6 years I've been working at the Boys and Girls Club Greenwich, serving as CEO, making sure that even in a town like this where there's extreme wealth, there's always a place for those kids that may not have as much, so that they can grow and become the best versions of themselves. So happy to be on the panel. Great men. I can't wait for this discussion.
So just a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, if you have questions, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So please, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please click that and put your questions there. We will be pulling the questions from that at the end of the discussions. Also, for all of y'all who may actually get on camera, you may want to use that Zoom button because this is being recorded so that people can actually see this later. And also, the conversation does not have to stop at the end of this presentation. Please, if you haven't already, go to eFlink, which is eflink.williams.edu, and join. You can reach any of us through there, and you can also continue to engage with the greater community as well as with individual members of Williams community. So with that, we're going to jump into our first question, and we'll probably just go around same order that we just did introductions. First question that I'd like to pose to the panel is about adapting to the current times. So right now, we're navigating through some really turbulent times, probably more turbulent than any of us may have experienced while we were at Williams or even leading up to Williams. So I'm just curious for each of you guys, what are the three things that you're doing right now to stay grounded and focused? Could we start with Stevon?
Yeah, great question. And I actually felt fortunate that I had some sort of a daily routine around a practice to stay focused and that focused on, like, you know, my physical, mental, and spiritual health, because this is definitely come into play throughout quarantine. San Francisco was one of the first districts in the country to close its schools, and that was a really hard day. I have like a daily meditation practice. You know, I'm a part of a faith community. I started to watch all these videos on YouTube about home workouts. So my burpee game is like at 100. I want to challenge Marquis right now. He's just like, he wanted to get at me. No, but so a daily workout, reading, meditation is huge. And I feel fortunate to, you know, still have my family in San Francisco. That's not the case for a lot of Black residents. We've you know, we're sort of one of those national stories of gentrification and displacement, the Black community in San Francisco. But my grandmother lives around the corner. Being in public service, I wanted to be out and about, as available as possible to people that have been suffering. But I also, you know, have an 85-year-old grandmother in my life. So I want to be able to go over there and not worry about getting her sick. So as a result, I have a podcast called Cook on Monday Morning, and I've been doing a lot more of that to have valuable conversations with people in the community. So that's, you know, that's in general what my practice has been since quarantine has started.
Thank you. Marquis?
I think for me, I think one of the things that, well, just looking at three things that sort of keep me grounded, but also just sort of keep me up to speed. One of the things is, you know, obviously the appreciation of family and just understanding that, you know, at the end of the tunnel, you know, there's a huge blessing that comes out of what's happening right now. As sad as it is for the larger world, for us, it's just kind of like, you know, you can really stay grounded and really just be close to family. In terms of from a professional standpoint, though, I think it's advantageous in the sense that, you know, one of the things that, like, you know, I sort of adhere to is sort of trying to figure out how to cut the middleman out. So it's just kind of like figuring out what the current landscape is. You know, working in television, and in particular in sports television, you know, the landscape and the way that people are consuming television and media in general has changed so much. So I think one of the ways to sort of stay grounded is to try and figure out what those niches are. Like, what are the ways to sort of, you know, cut out, you know, having to, you know, hire, you know, tons, like huge film crews and, you know, 15 and 16 bodies, and figuring out how to do things yourself. So I think one of the things is just understanding like the younger demographic and the way that they consume content. You know, that's one way that, you know, I've been able to just really sort of stay on top of things. And then I think the other thing that sort of helps me stay grounded is just kind of humbling myself and just understanding that, you know, doing my research on what are the other great products that are out there. So there are other really good filmmakers out there, and just really studying what other people are doing, and understanding that, this is a very subjective field, and that you're going to learn so much from everyone. So sort of just sitting back and just kind of watching what people are doing, and just sort of taking a bunch from them, so that when things really start to pick back up, we'll be ready. So I think for me, those are sort of some of the ways that I've been able to sort of keep my eyes out on what's going on, but also, sort of stay in front of the pack.
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say one of the things that I also found I've had to do during this is set boundaries, because especially being in tech and being East Coast and West Coast, now that everybody's home, people just grab time all the time. And, after the fourth day where I realized I'd been on Zoom from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m., I figured I had to start blocking out time for me just to make sure that I could do like basic creature comforts, like, shower and get food. But folks, because they are now distributed across the world, they don't have a lot of insight into what your day looks like. And so they grab what's good for them. And so I found I've had to push back a little and say, I get that. Let's slot you just like we would if we were in a regular office, so that this works for all of us. With that, Billy, how about you? Like, what are some of the things that you found that have made it a little bit easier for you to get through this?
Anybody who knows me knows I love to cook, and that comes from the fact of my family. I'm grounded in my family and the traditions of my family and in my community. So I find myself cooking a lot, and calling my family while I'm cooking, enjoying the stories and the memories, or our friends, and just laughing. So that get at least keeps me sane, and that I can connect with those loved ones that I have. There have been a lot, some people, especially in my community, that have passed because of COVID-19, and my family has been spared, and I am blessed, but just learning from these experiences, like Marquis said, and just appreciating family even more, and trying your best to connect with them and understand why they are important. Another thing that keeps me grounded, and I'm blessed for that as well, is my students. My students, I'm essential. So despite the fact that many people underrate teaching and the profession of teaching, I am essential, and I have to get up every single day and do my due diligence to get out there, engage youth, and still inspire them to be great, and that's part of the challenge of in this remote experience, is that while I mastered a lot of the tools of physically engaging people, now that I'm just here trying to rise to that challenge of bringing in my students on this remote experience and still getting them to still having that same impact. And then I think third is always my faith. A lot of people, I believe in God. And for anyone that has been through the experiences that I have been through, I know that there's a higher power getting me through everything. I might not go to church, I might not do those things, but I know that I believe in a God, and it gets me through. And those are my big three.
Thank you. And Bobby, how about you?
Well, a lot have already been mentioned. Ben, I'm probably not as good as you are, but I've been really trying to perfect my cooking skills. I've always enjoyed cooking, and being from Texas, I can care less what the weather is. I'm generally outside on the grill, smoked a couple of cuts of meat, and just doing a lot of things. Cooking, and my daughter, in the midst of this, decided she wanted to go vegan. So we've been perfecting vegan dishes in our house as well. So that's been a challenge for a guy from Texas that's used to eating as much meat as possible. Speaking of which, I have 3 kids, so an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and in 4 days I have a 12-year-old. So we've had quarantine birthdays. It's been a lot of time with the family, and it's really special when you get to spend this kind of time with the kids. And my kids are athletes, and so it's been nice getting outside with them, and they finally relented and let me become daddy coach. which isn't always a fun place to be, but we've been doing a lot outside, from walks to I have them doing different drills, or my son, he's much bigger than I am, believe it or not. I'm trying to challenge him to push-up contests. I can't do much else, but I can do more push-ups than he can. I think my goal is to get to 100 at once, but I'm around 75, and poor big boy, he's only around 30. So I still got it. And then the other, I work in an after-school program. And so it's amazing when schools close, after-school programs become something uniquely different. And so my work has been really redefining what we do, and finding different ways to stay connected with the kids and with the families. And again, we live in Greenwich, but people would be surprised that there's actually a food pantry here in Greenwich. And within the first week, they saw a 50% increase in the number of families that needed food. And so we've actually deployed some of our vehicles. So we go out 3 days a week with 2 of our vehicles and 4 of our employees. We're actually delivering food to people in need, a lot of elderly folks particularly. And then on the weekends, we have a partnership with another local group that provides food for kids to make sure that when school breakfast and lunch is in during the week, there's still food for the kids on the weekends. Our club, we actually distribute food every Friday and Saturday to make sure that those kids have food over the weekend. And I'm proud to tell you that started, we closed on March 12th, and we were giving food out on March 13th. So we just really try to come up with what does virtual programming look like in the after school hours. What connections can we have with tutoring for those kids that even when they're offline with their teachers, they still have someone to go to. So we're just trying to work on it.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to shift a little bit into something, and I'm looking, we got 40 people on the call, which is great. And I think people are going to find this kind of interesting. I'm wondering for each of you, what did you think you wanted to major in when you first entered Williams, and what career did you think you were going to graduate with, and how'd that work out? And then also, how was the alumni network factored into where you ultimately landed? I know for me, I came into Williams swearing that I was going to be a lawyer. That was the thing I thought. I left Williams in finance, and now I'm in tech, and I'm doing a job that didn't even exist when I graduated. So, all that to say that no matter what school you went to, no matter, what thing you did, like, you don't always end up where you started. So I think it'd be interesting to hear from each of you guys about what that journey was like for you, both preconceived notions, where things ended up, and then also like how the network, how the community kind of helped along that. I'm actually going to switch up the order a little bit. This time I'm going to start with Billy.
Okay. You said a lot. That was a lot. In this, I need a pass on this one. Let me think about this one a little more.
Okay, that's fair, but we're gonna come back, so you don't get to slide.
Definitely. But I need to pass on this one because this is.
Okay, Marquis, how about you?
Interesting question. I mean, I think when I was a freshman at Williams, I think for the most part, I thought that I'd probably become like a Wall Street guy, believe it or not. Like I just felt like, I was a kid who came from Brooklyn, New York, which was very, urban. And then I actually went off to prep school, to boarding school, and then ended up in Williamstown for college. So I just felt like that trajectory sort of lent itself to that sort of world, the Wall Streets and the clean cut, very educated, young professionals. But I think that, toward the back end of my senior year, I just wanted to be around, socializing more with people. And I sort of gravitate that way. And my first job out of college was at HBO Sports, and it was on a show called Inside the NFL, which is currently at Showtime. But I bring up that story to bring it up just because when I got to HBO Sports, there was a guy named Jason Hare, who's coincidentally, he's the director of the Jordan documentary right now, who's actually a Williams alum. And when I first got into sports television, I was one of those guys who didn't know anything about television at all. I didn't know tape stocks. I didn't know how to do anything. But Jason sort of took me under his wing, first and foremost, because I was a Williams alum. And he wanted to sort of, show me the way. And, I have a couple terror stories where like I really, really messed up and thought that was the end of my career. And sort of he brought me to the side and was just kind of like, as long as I see your passion and I see that, you have talent at this, I'll always, sort of be in your corner and make sure that, you really excel at this. And that's sort of like, that was my introduction into sports television was, being lucky enough to get that job straight out of college with no experience, but also running into someone from the Williams network who took me under their wing. And to this day, he and I were the closest of friends. So that's the way that, the Williams Alumni Network has helped me out. But really quickly, I would just say, we just need more people who look like us, I think, in that type of position. And I think that, in television, it's pretty hard because people behind the camera don't necessarily look like us. But I would say that, that would have been very comforting to me to have that sort of support network going into a job like that, to just have someone coming from a similar background to me who looks like me, who's able to help us out. So I would encourage that to be something that we all aspire to do moving forward.
Thank you. Bobby, how about you?
Well, I'm one of those really unique people that I actually went. Can you hear me? All right. It was interesting because I actually went to Williams and knew that I wanted to become a teacher. I had a life transformative experience in high school with one teacher. And it wasn't so much that he was even a great teacher. He showed me the power of what a teacher could do if they actually cared about a student. And I went to Williams. I was actually a double major for a while in history and then in Spanish, believe it or not. I'd fallen in love with maybe it was growing up in Dallas or whatnot, but didn't finish that Spanish major at Williams. And that mainly had to do because I couldn't travel. At that point, by my junior year of college, I was pretty much paying my way through school. Didn't have a lot of support from home. So I couldn't figure out how to work and go to school. So I just gave up the major. But I ended up concentrating in African-American studies at Williams. And so a lot of the history that I've taught has been American history. And every once in a while, you get an opportunity to maybe do something with that concentration. So a lot of the unique pathways that I take in my courses always reflect sort of those African-American courses that I took. And it's actually pretty funny. I had a mother once teach me, accuse me, actually is a better word, of not teaching, what does she say? You're not teaching real history. You're teaching too much Black history, which that was a very interesting conversation. And I had to, tell it, just because you don't know it doesn't mean that it's not true. And that was it was a great thing because that concentration is probably some of the best studying that I've ever done because it was interdisciplinary. So history, art history, music, political science, religion, all those things sort of came together in that concentration. It actually helped me later on in education because I've taught English, I've taught history, I've taught life skills. I've been a mentor to certain kids. And so what I was able to do with that concentration has really played itself out in a lot of different ways. And, Marquis, you said it best, man, having people look like you. Going into independent school education, it can be lonely looking like us. I'll be very honest with you. When I was a principal at one point, I went to Connecticut, New York, New Jersey gathering of middle school principals. There were 227 people, and there were exactly 3 people that looked like me in that room. And you begin to realize how tough that was, how at times lonely it is. And what I started doing when I didn't have networks, I started building my own. There were no pre-made groups to join. So throughout my career, I found people with my passion who look like me that have sort of helped guide me. So definitely connections and networks. I can't stress that enough.
No, thank you. And actually, that's a pretty, now both of you have said that, and that's a pretty powerful statement, and actually something that we talked about a little bit on the organizing committee as we were talking through this. That thing about not seeing a lot of people like us. One of the advantages and disadvantages of graduating from a school like Williams is that once we get out, all people see is Williams, which is kind of weird because it means that we end up in some positions that we weren't really prepared to be in. And worse, we get all the baggage of having gone to an elite Northeastern school without any of the perks growing up in a lot of cases that other people had. So it is wild because you're expected, because you did come from those places, to be performing at a particular level and knowing some things that we don't always know. Billy, you ready for us now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So, you know, it's interesting that you talk about representation and things like that and so forth, because I just remember that, you know, I went to Williams, like many Black and Hispanics or Black and brown bodies, that from where I come from, when you are intelligent, especially in math and science, you are always told this ghetto dream of you are going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, and everybody goes and you're so ambitious and you go to school and you get the good grades and you're a doctor and a lawyer, doctor, oh great, good. And that drove my identity for so many years. And one of my best friends and I always talked about that. We used to sit in Spanish class and I'd be like, girl, look at this. This is Harvard dreams. We all had dreams of going to Harvard or something and so forth to be a doctor or a lawyer. And this is where it landed us, our hard work, our work ethic. So I started to really understand what my work ethic was about at Williams and why I needed to constantly push forward. So I went there thinking I was going to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And that's what drove my experience at Williams. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Because when you talk about a network and a summer science program, I would have not succeeded if it wasn't for the summer science program at Williams. And they also came out with summer humanities. That was the first place where they at least grouped us. And it wasn't like an EOP program where they were like, hey, your minorities are not up to par. So here, come and get this done. No, they really treated us with respect. The summer humanities program was about research and developing something that, you know, about your identity or campus identity or problematic, something that's a problem of the world. And then in summer science, we were really working and making those connections with research scientists that were guiding our careers. I know a lot of summer science people that, just like me, ended up being career changers, but also feel like the process of going through research science helped them to be leaders in their career because we think differently, analytically, critically, and so forth. So those were the great skills that I gained from majoring in chemistry and even getting kicked out of Williams. I remember I dealt with a lot with my identity of just like, am I smart? Do I belong here? Why did they accept this little ghetto piece of trash from homeless from the South Bronx if I got kicked out and I couldn't make it? And then, may she rest in peace, Olga Beaver, my math professor, called me and said, honey, you are a calculus genius and you will be my tutor. And I haven't seen a teacher that can teach calculus like you. So come down to my office. And she had me tutoring kids at Williams that were from affluent backgrounds, from Andover, Phillips Exeter, all these places showed that. And here I was from a little high school, public high school in New York. And I was just this math genius, she felt. Mind you, I wasn't even a math major, but I loved math. And that was one of the first levels that I learned about social justice, I think, that a white math teacher told me in elementary school, if you want to be something, you better know math as a minority and not fear math. She said, because everybody in this school system will say you stupid if you don't know math and science. And that is a lot of the career. Like if we weren't excelling in math and science, no one was looking at black authors, black writers and giving them validation and saying, hey, you write so well. No, that the way the school systems are struck right now and are built, it is an assault on our character and everything that we are about as Black and brown bodies. And that was the experience. So it shaped me a lot. And getting kicked out of Williams, I ended up thought I was going to medical school, but right before my mother died, she called me and said, don't do it. What you need to do is become a doctor of education and go for it and be a teacher and go and fight for what you believe in the public school systems. And that's what I went and did. I went back to my community And I said, let me go back to the South Bronx. Let me go back to East Harlem. Let me teach Black and brown bodies. Let me represent. Let me show them that you can go to a #1 school in the country and not let that define my identity or where my place is. I would be middle class naturally, like was said, because of my Williams experience. My degree got me there. Now I had to show these kids that about this experience, how to be there and to live through this journey. And there was not enough representation like that, you know. And as I started to teach chemistry in urban spaces, a lot of kids are like, you know, I'm not a science major, but it's always crazy when I walk into a place and people are talking and I'm a Black or brown body, and I start to say, oh, I understand what you're talking about, butadiene, or I know this, or yeah, I know about the periodic table, and they look at these Black and brown bodies like they're crazy. That's my mission, because Black and brown bodies are smart. Black and brown bodies are important, and we are killing it, and we've always been inventing, you know. So that's now, like I said, I'm getting my PhD in science education from Columbia University, working with one of my great mentors, Dr. Christopher Emden, who is from the South Bronx and studies hip hop and science education. And he's now coining a term called ratchetdemic, and I am the ratchetdemic. Hello. You know, I'm arguing with him that I should be the cover, but you know, it's enough just to be studied and to have a voice, you know, to give teachers a voice that are ratchet like myself and are intelligent and academic, and to know that there's a space for me.
Thank you. Stevon, how about you?
Well, I appreciate the passion that I heard from Billy and everyone's responses. When I was a senior in high school, I wanted to be the first Black governor of California. And then I wanted to be P. Diddy. And when I got to Williams, it was definitely, you know, culture shock. You know, I think a lot of people experience a very abrupt transition. And I see Kellen Williams on the call. He was like the person I always like hung around. You know, he was a senior when I was a freshman, and he cut my hair. And then I thought, I'm gonna be a barber. Because, you know, figuring out what to do academically at Williams took a long time. I see Robert Bland on the call too. You know, I was like, I struggled with my writing. I went from being like this very, you know, accomplished student at my low-income public high school, one the best there, to feeling very inadequate academically. And I really picked a major based on wanting to escape Williams. I was like, oh, if I do American Studies, I can study abroad, because I already got most of the classes. So I did that and ended up going to Paris. And I think a lot of the way that the Williams community has shown up for me is been because I've tried to struck out and do something interesting. And the people that were interested in that always supported me. You know, like a lot of people on this call, like donated to my first school board campaign. They had nothing to do with San Francisco public education, like Fumi and Robert and Kellen and other people, and Josh. So the Williams community, alumni community, has always backed me no matter what I've taken on. And I think it's because it's always been about trying to build something. And I got inspired by builders, people that were, you know, consistently building something. Prosper is a Williams graduate. I think he's 02, but he's built several tech companies and he's based out here. Or he could be 03. And that's somebody that, you know, I stay in touch with, is Williams alumni. Glenn Shannon is someone that's always supported me. So, you know, throughout a lot of my political stuff, the Williams alumni community has shown up. And for 5 years, I didn't get to get into this as much, but I was the CEO of a nonprofit called Mission Bit, and we taught coding in high schools across the Bay Area, after school and summer coding classes. And, you know, I was an American Studies major. I still don't know how to code, but I was interested in solving a problem and getting a learning opportunity in the hands of kids that you know, they didn't have access to it. Like we were out in East Oakland, and you meet a lot of young people struggling with asthma, you know, like live in very violent communities. All of the public health and safety issues that are rampant in a lot of the communities that we want to introduce coding in. A lot of that framing was, you know, if we can solve a problem using this technology, like what would you want to solve? And so that became the framework for a lot of my career. Like, how do we build something together? How do we solve problems? And whenever I've gone out and tried to do that, the Williams community has supported me.
Great. And actually that leads to an interesting segue, but before we do, I do want to remind people about the Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. Please press that and let us get your questions, because we are reserving a little bit of time at the end of this to be able to answer those questions and engage a little bit more. What'll happen is you'll just enter those in there. We'll then read those off and answer those. So you won't have to get on the screen, you won't have to speak, but we'd absolutely love to hear kind of what your thoughts are. Given what all of you have said, actually, for me, the logical segue, the logical question to get next is around mentorship and around us as a community. And how would you recommend people approach folks in the community from a mentorship standpoint, like being able to ask for help, ask for guidance, right? I mean, I know I've been asked that question a lot of times during the time since I came out, like, and you know, there's the basics, right? Where you tell people the last thing you do is you call and you ask somebody for a job. You're really asking for people to give you input and help guide them along a path. But for each of you, if you could spend a little bit of time telling people, like, how would you recommend folks engage with both our specific community, that being the communities of color, but also the greater community of Williams, right? I mean, we've got, you know, several thousand living alums in almost any city that any of us are in. How would you expect people, or how would you suggest people engage that way? Let's start with Marquis this time.
I would say from my prior experience, and you know, and I was guilty of it myself coming up, but I would say that, like, you know, one of the more important things to bring to the table is, especially like if I'm talking in the creative space, if you're going to reach out to someone to sort of, you know, get help or to, you know, pick their brains on what they do, I would say just have something tangible with you. So like, it's not just sort of coming out of nowhere. It's just kind of like, oh, you know, I'm interested in what you do. And the conversation sort of stops there. I would recommend it just being like, you know, I've had this passion of becoming a filmmaker, and I've taken the initiative to go out and do these things. You know, it might not be as polished as I would like it to be at this moment, but here is the effort that I've put into it. Here's my vision, and you know, I would like for you, and I'm not even talking about like internships or jobs or anything of that sort to start off with, but it's just kind of like, I would like for you to give me creative criticism, or just give me advice on how to get this product where I would like it to be. And I think that, like, if you approach people in that way, I think it's much more appreciated. I think that, you know, again, like with me, like right out of college, I was still unsure of exactly what I wanted to do. So I would just reach out to people and just say, hey, I'm a Williams alum, just thinking that that would be enough for people to just be like, all right, well, just come work here. But in retrospect, looking back at it, and I get a fair amount of emails from people who are interested in the things that I do. And I think that the ones that really stand out most to me are the kids who are just kind of like, you know, I took my iPhone and I went to the local high school, and there's an interesting story of a kid who grew up in poverty, and, you know, he just won a state title. And I filmed for 7 months, and I put together this film. What do you think? And I think that if someone approaches me in that way, that's much more attractive to me, and much more, I'm much more willing to share everything that I know to help in their ascension. So long story short, I would just say, you know, be prepared when you reach out to people for help, and not just be sort of abstract. I would just really have something tangible in hand. And I think that that goes a long way.
Thank you. Bobby, how about you?
I would say, just thinking how I sort of did things, because particularly to jump from independent school education to the nonprofit world, I'd never been in the nonprofit world. And I actually went through my Williams connections and talked to one guy, Diedrich Muhammad, who's in my grade, and talked to Diedrich because he's been doing nonprofit work for quite some time, and we've sort of stayed in touch over the years. And I told him what I wanted to do. So Marquis, sort of exactly what you were talking about. I had this idea. This is sort of the kind of work I've been doing. I've been doing some research into nonprofits. Hey, Diedrich, what do you think? And he was able to hook me up with another Williams alum whose husband happened to be sort of in the nonprofit world, more in line with what I was hoping to do, particularly working directly with kids. And so for me, that Williams network really came through. And Marquis, just like you said, I went in, although not knowing exactly where I wanted to go, but having some idea of where my experience was taking me and what I thought would be the next steps. And so, sometimes picking up that phone, and that's what it was. And I'll be very honest. Even in the nonprofit space, I've actually gone through the alumni, the portal, and looked up people in the directory. And I was looking for some people in my area who happened to be doing things in my field. And so I was able to get a smaller network of people, and was shocked that there were some folks that I was on campus with, whether they were class of 92 up to the class of 97. And I was able to sort of reconnect with some of those people that are doing very similar work. And it's interesting, one of them will probably become a board member at the club within the next few years, because he brings a level of medical expertise that I think we really need at the club, as we're looking at not only what's going on now, but some of the other concerns that we've had. And so, for me, I was able to use that, some of the tools and some of the personal connections in order to expand what I'm doing professionally. And, don't be afraid, to make that one call. I hadn't talked to Diedrich in a little while, but I'd been following his career through social media, and it was just a simple reconnection of a good brother who took it from there and really helped me out. And 6 years later, look where I am. So Diedrich, I don't know if you're on. I've been checking to see, but I appreciate it all.
Thank you. I know one of the things that's been mindful for me now that I'm back in social media as a profession is I've actually gotten a lot better about just reaching out just to reach out, not waiting till I need something, not waiting until there's a problem I'm trying to solve or a person I'm trying to help, and just reconnecting, right? It's the concept that we talked about before about kind of horizontal networking, right? Like not trying to necessarily match up with people either above or below you, there's a mentor or a mentee, but also just keeping that connection open, because we did build a lot of really good relationships when we were there. And I've even made Williams relationships post-Williams because I went to Williams and a Williams person put me in touch with somebody else that I should have known when I was at school and I didn't. So, I think that that's something folks should be mindful of as well. Billy, how about you?
So one of the things that I noticed is just that even in my journey just now as an alumni mentor and then as an alumni mentee and playing different roles, is that Williams people or Williams alums, what we love is passion, dedication, and commitment. And if you have, that's what Marquis is talking about, that's what Bobby's talking about. If you come with that passion, that dedication, that fire, that commitment, and I can see that you want this more than what I can provide for you, it compels me or it has compelled people who have helped me in the past to do it and to actually put themselves out there and say, listen, this is the person. When you're looking for just a job, or just a little bit of guidance, it's very hard because, I'm a very passionate, I'm a very committed person. So I want people that are serious in education and in teaching and so forth. I'm assuming that's what the same thing Marquis would love in filmmaking. Don't just come into this with no purpose, then we have just regular people, we don't want that. And part of our journey as ETH alum is to have a voice in leadership and creating those pathways that if our organizations don't have that pathway for us, we create that space. And I see that Nicole asks, what advice would you give, for men of color to create spaces across in terms of decision making? We have the power to sit on boards, get on boards, nonprofit board making. And I think that's one of the big things that I would say, you know, get out there, have a voice, change the lives of others in terms of decision making. Don't be afraid to get that VP position or that CEO position, because then you probably will be able to create a little more change and make those decisions. But I think a lot of this is operating on the fact that you have to become fearless and resilient, you know, through this process. And not be afraid to ask alumni, you know, because a lot of us coming out of college at first, as young alumni, I'd be like, oh my God, you know, there's so many things that we're going through. I need to be perfect. I need to be perfect. You do not need to be perfect. And that's the time when you should be seeking advice from old, you know, our seasoned Williams alumni, because we need help through that initial process of guidance and so forth for our young alumni, and then just continuously giving back. And like I said, creating spaces of opportunity for us to talk and gather around with our thoughts, like Bolin Legacy Weekend.
Definitely, definitely. Stevon, what about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely a great example of not being perfect when doing outreach to to alumni. And you know, I personally, I take every call. Somebody hits me on LinkedIn, they send me an email. I got 15, 20 minutes for you. It's not a big deal. And you know, we'll work through that. Like people did that for me. When I first finished college, somebody told me to make a list of like 200 alumni in the fields that you're interested in. Send them all one email. Out of that, you know, maybe 30 are going to respond. Out of that, you're going to get really close to 5. And within those 5, there are going to be opportunities that you only got access to because you went to Williams. And so I did that. You know, it's how I met one of our alumni named Gail Covington. Her sister, Monique Covington's husband, started a company called Rocket Lawyer. Rocket Lawyer is similar to LegalZoom. And so, you know, I worked there for a few weeks, but but we have since been connected. I sent all of them my resume, all the 200, and another alumni sat down with me and pointed out all the typos in my resume. You know, so like not perfect, right? When I was running for office, this is another example of a mistake. I took out emails from the Williams alumni and asked everybody to come to my political stuff, and the Williams college staff was like, "This is not okay." So another example of a mistake. So you know, I haven't been one that's been, you know, I've made mistakes, and I've also gotten connected to people. And I think one of the barriers I see with some of my colleagues that are alumni is them being unwilling to reach out. And I think that overcoming that apprehension is something to practice. So, you know, I over-index in that ability. Like I am going to reach out, and I am going to take your call. But if you are looking for a career transition, which I know happens a lot for people sort of like, you know, throughout their careers, come back to the Williams alumni and start a practice of make it a goal to reach out to a set number of people per week, and like see where it goes, be open to, you know, where the journey is going to take you.
Thank you. We actually have some questions. We'll see how many we can get to in the amount of time that we have. The first one that came up is actually from Perry Kalmus, and I'm going to paraphrase, but basically Steve Case, who's also Williams alum, has been talking about the fact that we're leaving an awful lot of genius on the table because we're not empowering those that have been marginalized. The question is, how can we better engage underserved youth to overcome their obstacles and believe that they are not just worthy, but capable of achieving great things? Anybody want to speak to that? Bobby?
Well, you know, I think that, and maybe this is far too personal, but I'll make it personal anyway. For me, I'll be honest, it started by looking and seeing people who look like me in places where I wanted to go. And for a long time in my educational career, I'll be honest, I didn't have an African-American male teacher. I don't think ever. In lower school, middle school, high school, I never had one. it was in my last 2 years of high school that my school hired 2 African-American men. One was, I went to a private school. I finished in a private school anyway. And one was the head of admissions, which shocked everybody. You know, this is a old school, all boys, predominantly white school in Dallas. And to have a black man run admissions sort of caught people by storm. And I remember my friends and I, we like threw a party. The day he showed up, you know, and he became the greatest figure I've ever had. And watching him in a place of prominence and seeing that he could be in that environment, number one, just physically being there, and then two, being successful while he was there, it really began to open my eyes to, you know what, I don't have to sit back. I don't have to do this. You know what, his name was Ed Young, rest in peace, Mr. Young. But seeing his face, and I know that is so simple, but it's also why, for me, why I chose to go back in independent school education, because I had watched, you know, for years as a student, young men of color who sit and who want to know how good they really are. And yet they're part of a system that, as Perry said, sort of just keeps them down. And I was fortunate that the year I was hired to go back and teach at my alma mater, actually, they hired 5 men of color. And it was a completely different school, from the conversations we had around success to the ways in which we reached out into different communities, to the various, almost, while there were no official affinity groups, but the fact that the boys had a place and had a safe space to go. And you could see this level of confidence and this level of achievement that sort of was born from that. And I'm not trying to take any kind of credit, but it is just having people there who look like me, who inspired me, who pushed me. And even one of the coaches pulled me aside. I was just doing some really stupid stuff like high school boys can do. And I won't curse over the internet. You know, I don't want you guys to think poorly of me, but he pulled me aside and he had a man to a boy conversation about what it meant to become a man and what I needed to do and how I needed to stay focused. And those few men of color are some of my absolute greatest mentors. And I owe Herman Card, Ed Young, Jean Baptiste, all of them are some of my absolute greatest heroes. And I just think that that's one of the things, is that, you know, I'm looking at the 4 of us on this call, and we're all in such different, you know, all 5 of us, excuse me, and we're in such different areas of our lives and different careers. And I hope that, you know, we continue to inspire others, you know, to become the best versions of themselves. I mean, that's, you know, one of the burdens I think that all of us have to bear.
Although we should mention that Billy did not get the team haircut. So just so we're clear. Stevon, I thought you also—
It might be a wig, you don't know yet. You know.
Stevon, did you want to also add something before we go on to the next question?
I'll just briefly say that the importance of having lessons that are rooted in knowledge of self and communities that uplift messages about the knowledge of self and the true history of our ancestry is a must. And one of the big problems I have with, you know, our public education system, no matter where you go in the country, you don't find many, if any, spaces that are affirming of and tell the true history of our people in the world. So, you know, I think the next iteration of my career is focused on trying to build communities and instill those messages in young people. I think you have to be proactive around those messages. And you know, there's a lot of examples to build on, like that can help support bringing young people into that knowledge. One of the quick things I'll say is that it wasn't really until I got to Williams that I actually got a real breath of like what Black history was. You know, I never heard of Nat Turner until I got to Williams. So and it goes on and on and on. So with the knowledge that I've gained, I feel like that's the most important thing, especially around these topics and this history and this identity. I feel like that's one of my ultimate purposes in life, is to expand and instill that knowledge of self in others.
Thank you. I think one of the things that also strikes me is, and I don't know about the rest of you, but one of the best things Williams gave to me is I got to see other Black and brown people from other places. Because, I mean, I grew up in New York City and we made up 33% of the population when we were on campus. And that was my whole point of reference for what it meant to be of color, right? And so actually meeting people of color from California, from Texas, from a bunch of places that all we had was TV to tell us kind of what people were like from those places, and learn the differences and where we didn't agree, I thought was also really powerful, and helped me grow as a person, and also blow up some of the stereotypes that I had just about people in general. We've got time probably for about 2 more questions. And so first one I'm going to hit is from Brian Thomas, who asked, how do you continue to be engaged as alumni for younger alumni students as your day-to-day challenges mount in your personal lives? Who would like to take that?
I'll take a shot at this one. I think that, like, for me, it's just kind of like, and I hate to use the phrase which is kind of like, don't forget where you come from. But I think that, like, there's a huge responsibility that we have. And so as we attain certain amounts of success, right? Like, one of the things that we always aspire to do is to take care of your family, have enough resources for the loved ones around you, and to make sure that you're comfortable. But I also think that, like, it's on us to also realize that maybe that's not enough. Like, that's not everything that, like, we're required of. And I think that, like, it's very important for us to just kind of, like, get outside of our own comfortable bubble, and give back, because there are opportunities. Like, you'll be very surprised at how much of an impact you can make onto anyone's life, especially, like, people who are coming from underprivileged communities, and communities where they don't have the same resources that we've been lucky enough to attain as adults. So I think that, like, yes, while it's very important to make enough money for you and your family, and to have enough resources for you and your family, and to attain a certain level of success, it's very important for us not to forget that, like, along the way, there was someone or some organization or some group or whatever it might be that inserted a little bit of, energy into you, and a little bit of hope into you. And I think it's very important for us to give back, and to be able to share that, once we get to a certain level where we feel like, it's appropriate. So that's what I would say to that.
I just want to jump in really quickly. My mother used to always tell me that, listen, Billy, you are greater than the zip code you come from. And when I understood, I really was able to understand what she meant when I first experienced my journey to Williams. And at Williams, yeah, I might have not been the top student or other things, but I founded MBC, Nothing But Cuties. And I had an impact on the legacy of a campus. 20 years later, that organization still exists. And that came out of my hurt, my pain from me getting kicked out, So I learned that my community, we could keep each other sane and together. And that's one of the greatest things that I got out of that experience. And this, knowing that our community will be there for us if we reached out to them, and to guide us through these experiences, and taking that beyond the Williams. And like I said, even the winter studies, right? If you ever had the chance to be on a winter study, I went to South Africa, and who would think that me being in South Africa, not even understanding who the people were and at the time and place, would have such an impact in South Africa. So understanding that I was trained before and after, but Williams helped me fine tune those skills of understanding what my impact was. And sometimes it had nothing to do with the work that I'm doing. My impact sometimes came from just reaching out and having a conversation with an alumni and saying, hey, what's up? How are you doing through this experience? And getting them through that.
I want to be mindful of time. There was one other question we wanted to just ask that of the entire panel, because I think everyone would be interested in hearing this. But I did want to point out that we're going to actually put in the ability for folks to follow the questions that they've submitted through EveLink after the fact. So we'll make sure we get that out to everybody. But the last question we wanted to ask everybody is just simply, what's next for all of you? Like, in the ideal world, what are your plans and where do you see yourself personally and career-wise? Let's just take a couple of minutes and just hit that with everybody. I'll go first. Like, for me, I have the unique situation of, I've got 2 people graduating the class of 2021. So I'm having to think about, as a father and an alumni and even sort of a mentor, like, how do I help them navigate into the real world? Like, everything I've done for the last 21 years is all coming to a head next June. And right now, I don't even know if that's going to be on campus or not. So that's kind of interesting for me. Professionally, I've just taken a role like with a very big corporation that has a very big impact globally. And I'm having to figure out, how do I show up in that? Like, I'm being given an awful lot of opportunity and responsibility. And it's mine to do what I want with. So I know for me, I'm going to have to figure out how to be a lot more deliberate in the coming 12, 18 months and use this opportunity that I've been afforded because of my education and my training and my preparation to continue to make an impact. So I'd just love to go around the circle and have everybody chime in. Bobby, let's start with you.
Let's see. I think where I see myself, hopefully getting all 3 kids through high school. And that's always a good start. But professionally, I've been at the club for 6 years. I'm actually going to, Bill, I should let you know, I'm transitioning back into independent schools. Education has helped me get to where I am. And again, I'll keep going back to, I know what it was like being a man of color by myself in a classroom, often with no mentors. And I love what I've done at the club, but I'm really excited to transition back into the classroom and into that world, working with kids. In this case, I'll be working predominantly, at a school actually right down the street. But someday, I've always wanted to open my own school. I've been on a path actually to become a head of school for quite some time. About 10 years ago, interviewed for a couple of positions, just didn't feel it was right. But I actually think I want to try to open my own school in a neighborhood like mine, where I grew up in Dallas, that could rival any other school. I think I've always had an issue that if you were a person of color, in order for you to go to what someone considers a good school, somehow you were always one of a few, and people didn't look like you. And I refuse to believe that a school that could rival any high school in the country can't be in Oak Cliff, where I grew up. There are a lot of brilliant kids given the right opportunities, put in the right circumstances. I believe that can change the world. And I don't want them to have to go through the same culture shock that I had to go through, going 25 miles across town in a uniform, not fitting in at school and not fitting in at home. So my goal has always been to open a school in a neighborhood like I grew up in and help those kids become all they can be.
Okay, we'll just keep going down. Marquis?
I think in the immediate future, for me, I just want to continue to pump out documentaries. But I think, at some point in the future, I'd love to just continue to build my own production company and, do things that are outside of what I'm currently doing right now. So stories that are centered around, race, socioeconomics, and just sort of pain and struggle. And I just want to just build my own brand beyond what I'm doing right now at some point. So I think that's the long-term goal.
Stevon?
I'm a huge fan of Marquis's documentaries. Go buy them, support him. He has a few Emmys, he didn't mention that. I'm currently running for District 5 Supervisor. You can learn more at votestevon.com. I'll put the chat in the link. I'm also going to put a link in the chat about a book that was really helpful to me just around increasing my productivity is called deep work, or it's called digital minimalism. And I wrote a blog about it that was posted in the Williams alumni newsletter. I continue to be focused on solving problems. And right now, that work looks like winning this campaign, which is in November. It's the same day as the presidential election. And so, you know, that's the immediate term, but long term, that's what I want to be in the middle of. How do I solve problems and improve people's lives?
Thank you. And Billy.
Yeah, so I think short term right now and long term always is that just to continue to create spaces and opportunities for Black and brown young bodies to always be empowered and to be engaged with people, like everyone said on the panel today, that look like them. You know, that's extremely important to me. My next steps are maybe to finish my doctorate, you know, my PhD, and then ensure that where that would take me next, you know, I might get appointed as U.S. Secretary of Education. It would be great for someone to see people like me up on those positions, you know, instead of seeing someone that's always so cookie cutter. But we'll get there with due time. And I know I'm in the fight and I'm in the process of changing what education looks like for who we are in our people. And like I said, just being there for Black and brown bodies.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you gentlemen for being with us today. This has been fantastic. It's been incredibly engaging, very interactive. I appreciate all of your candor and all your willingness just to be open, right, and vulnerable. I also want to thank everybody who sent us questions. Thank you very much for your participation and interaction. And I would encourage everybody who's not on eFlink yet to please go out there to eflink.williams.edu, register, so we can keep these conversations going and continue this. My name is Raph Johnson, and I've had a ball doing this. Thank you very much for spending the last hour with us and going a little bit over. And I hope to see you guys all in person soon.